Today we have the poem Telephone Conversation by Wole Soyinka. The title of the poem, Telephone Conversation, itself tells us that it is a conversation over the phone. So it's going to be a dialogue between two people. So here we have a young man seeking accommodation, and he is talking to his landlady. He has got a particular house that he would like to ask for the rent and also to stay. The price seemed reasonable, location indifferent. The landlady swore she lived off premises. Nothing remained but self confession. Madam, I warned. I hate a wasted journey. I am African. Silence. Silenced transmission of pressurized good breeding. Voice, when it came, lipstick coated, long, gold rolled, cigarette holder piped. Caught I was foully. So here, this African young man, he is speaking to a white woman, a British lady, and we see that in the beginning he says that the price seemed reasonable. The price was quite fair, quite sensible, something that he could afford. The location was indifferent. The location did not matter. It was good enough for him. And the landlady also promised that he would have privacy there, in the sense that she lived off premises. She wouldn't keep coming in. So everything seemed fine. So our protagonist feels that it would be a good house to take. Nothing remained but self confession, he says. The very word confession brings to our mind the word guilty. When you talk about yourself, you don't confess, you introduce yourself. But here we see that our young man is confessing. And what is his deep, dark secret that he must confess? Something for which he must be guilty. And that is that he is African. I am African. And immediately there is silence. The woman does not talk. For a minute, there is silence. Silenced transmission of pressurized good breeding. So we see that this lady now she is calculating based on this information. What is she supposed to answer? And this man, he says, I was caught foully. The word foully is used. He was caught shamefully. He was caught in a very humiliated manner. So why does he feel so ashamed? Now, this is one of Wole Soyinka's poems, which I personally love. And because I feel that in this poem, in a very subtle, very humorous way, the author talks about racism, something which is very painful and very deep, but in a very simple way, in a simple few free verse, he is able to tell us. So he says that this lady, whom he imagines to have that lipstick coated and gold rolled cigarette holder, he can see an image of her, of this white woman, and he says that he was caught off guard by what she was going to say. So let's see what she's going to say. How dark. I had not misheard. Are you light or very dark? Button B, button A. Stench of rancid breath of public hide and speak. So she asked this monumentally foolish question. How dark? This is what she asks the man. And he is wondering, did I mishear? Is it possible for anyone to come up with such a question? And yet this woman repeats, are you light or very dark? Button B, button A. So we know that he is standing in a public booth and talking. And it is for her, this question is as if he can talk about his race, his culture, his background, as if it was a multiple choice of button A or button B. That's all. Are you dark or light? That is all. So a stench of rancid breath of public hide and speak. He talks about a stench, an unpleasant smell showing us of this dark, sad, pathetic state of a human mind. He says public hide and speak. So hide and seek, the popular children's game where one is hiding and the other one is seeking. It is a joyous, fun-filled game. But here the protagonist says there is a hide and speak for a person who is of a dark color. He has to hide his color. It is best that he do not tell about his own origin or color, because as long as he is on the telephone and she cannot see him, she was willing to give him the house. But the moment he brought forth his color, when it came into light, when he was no longer hiding, then immediately she has apprehensions. Red booth, red pillar box, red double-tired omnibus squelching tar, it was real. So he is seeing a red booth, then there is a red pillar box and the red omnibus, the buses that are going around, squelching tar. So all these repeated use of the word red brings to mind anger. The feeling of anger is usually represented by red color. Moreover, the red pillar box, the red telephone booth and the red omnibus all bring to mind London. The author at that point of his life was a young student living in London, and that is where he is seeking accommodation. So the omnibus is squelching tar. The word squelching means a heavy vehicle going through a muddy surface, with a soft sucking or hissing kind of sound that happens when it is going through the tar or the mud. Squelching is also means to squelch a rebellion, to squelch a voice, to squelch a protest. So these are all these images come to mind. So a very vivid imagery is already painted. It was real, shamed by ill-mannered silence, surrender, pushed dumbfounded to beg simplification. Considerate she was, varying the emphasis. So this was real. This question that she asked, it was real. And our author feels shamed. You see here the paradox. In reality, this lady who, without seeing the man for real, without knowing his character, his origin, his background, she is so presumptuous. She thinks that she can simply throw judgment without even knowing him. She has no qualms about throwing judgment on this young man, whereas he is shamed by her ill manners. He is ashamed. She is, that ill mannered silence is forcing him to surrender. He is dumbfounded. He is speechless at her audacity, at her shamelessness. That he is pushed. In fact, he is having to beg for simplification. Is it really my color that this lady is demanding to know? Considerate she was. She's quite considerate. She was varying the emphasis. Are you dark or very light? Revelation came. So once again she repeated the question, are you dark or very light? And the word revelation is a realization for our author. The word revelation comes from the New Testament Bible, when God reveals to man. The very word revelation is used in all religious texts. It is to reveal or bring to view something of such fantastic disclosure, like Prophet Musa when he saw the burning bush, the revelation that came to him. So such a way, revelation is coming to the protagonist, and he asks her a question like plain or milk chocolate. So he is asking her the question, so are you asking if I am like plain chocolate or milk chocolate? Now, we also see the paradox of how rather classless she is and how tolerant though angry our protagonist is. He has every right to feel anger, disappointment, but he does not leave his impeccable manners. He is very well mannered. He is speaking so beautifully. He is with great respect. Again, referring to her as madam, he is asking her, is it like plain or milk chocolate that you're asking? We also need to understand that both these items are equally good. There is no choice, there is no difference. Her accent was clinical, crushing in its light impersonality, rapidly wavelength adjusted. So her assent, her approval or her agreement, she agreed, yes, you have understood me. Assent means agreement. She agreed in a very clinical, very impersonal, cold fashion. She did not hesitate to agree to that. Yes, that is exactly what I am asking you. Crushing in its light, but it was crushing. It was so, so humiliating for the protagonist. But rapidly his wavelength is adjusted. We know the how the two troughs of a wave are adjusted, you know, so that it flows the same. He said, I chose West African sepia, and as an afterthought, down in my passport. So he is giving a rather humorous reply. He says, West African sepia. The color sepia stands for brown, brownish, blackish, with a reddish hint. It's almost like a color a photograph, like that. So, such a color. And as an afterthought, he says, down in my passport. Silence for spectroscopic flight of fancy till truthfulness changed her accent. So now there is silence, and the poet is imagining how this lady is thinking of the spectrum of colors, the spectroscopic flight of fancy. Her fancy is taken to all the spectrum of the colors. She's thinking, what manner of dark could he be? Is he just plain chocolate, or is he more darker or extremely black? She's thinking till truthfulness changed her accent, and then her approval slowly changed. Hard on the mouthpiece. What's that? Conceding. Don't know what that is. And then she says, I am not sure what it is. I don't know what it is. Because he has said West African sepia. Like brunette. So she asks, now brunette stands for dark brown black. It is a word of French origin. It is usually to refer to a fair person, maybe with dark hair, or also for a dark skinned, dark toned person. That's dark, isn't it? Now she's asking, that's dark. When he said, yes, it's brunette, she's like, that's very dark. And here, our author has lost his patience. He says, not altogether. Facially, I am brunette. My face is brunette. It's brown. But, madam, you should see the rest of me. Palms of my hand, soles of my feet are a peroxide blonde. So the soles of my feet are like a blonde person whose hair is bleached. A bleached blonde color means peroxide blonde. Friction caused foolishly, madam, by sitting down, has turned my bottom raven black. So he then says, madam, my bottom, caused by so much friction of sitting down, has become raven black. One moment, madam, he then sensed that she was about to keep the phone. She is now angry. Her receiver rearing on the thunderclap about my ears, he knew that she's going to bang the phone down, but he still continued. Madam, I pleaded, wouldn't you rather see for yourself? So that is his final question. By the time she would have banged the phone down. So this is a hilarious poem. I think that is what makes this poem so special. The fact that it is so funny, that such a painful, incredibly distasteful topic like racism has been approached with so much humor. You know, he has reduced racism to ridiculousness. Now, the poet Wole Soyinka, he is a Nigerian poet. He was a poet, a playwright, an artist, a professor, a public worker, a social worker, a freedom fighter, and the list goes on. He has won the Nobel Prize in 1986 for literature. And this telephone conversation was written while he was very young. In one of his interviews with Stefan Amris, Wole Soyinka says that at that period he was in Britain and he had grown up in Nigeria in the British colony and in a Yoruba family. And he says that during that period he grew up with colonial masters on one side, but there were also a great many Italian traders, shopkeepers, there were Greek merchants, there were people from Jamaica, and there were people from Lebanon doing trade. So he grew up in a very mixed culture, even though there were the British masters. And he says that as a child growing up, he knew that everybody, there are so many different races, but he says that never had he felt his otherness so pronounced as when he moved to London. When he came to a predominantly white society, he realized that even though he had grown up through apartheid, this was something even more tremendously shocking for him. He was the other. He was made to feel that he was the other. He was different. He came from a poor background. He was made to feel that, he's coming from he's saying that I was subjected to very foolish questions. He was even subjected to hearing that a person from such a background or Africa would stink. So he says that these monumentally foolish questions made him dumbfounded. He felt that the only reply would be to be in humor, to show them how ridiculous it is. So here he has reduced this racism. The very basis of apartheid is racism, and this racism he has reduced it to such a level as a joke. Now we see this woman, and even at the end of the poem, we have to see that it does not end in, as far as the man is concerned, it does not end in victory, because she's going to keep the phone and he's not going to get the house. So it does not end in victory, but to the audience, the message is clear how foolish racism is. But here too, by keeping the phone down, we see that the white supremacist or the white ruling voice is able to subjugate or silence the black voice simply by not listening, simply by refusing to listen to their side of the story. Now we have to go through the devices. We have irony, we have paradox, sarcasm, and it is like a dialogue, a poem which is in the form of dialogues. The line, I hate a wasted journey. This is something very important. This line shows that the author has been doing this several times previously. This is not the first time that he is going to check for a house. He says, I hate a wasted journey. That means white supremacists, people of color, have treated him like this previously too. This is not his first experience. He's going through this several times. And that must make us think. Just imagine that something as simple as your housing or your education or the street that you walk in, the shop that you go to, all this is going to be dictated by your color, your race. How awful it is. That is what the author has made us think here. In his other works like Immigrants, Other Immigrants, he makes very clear the feeling of being in a new land where people are going to treat you differently. So it is possibly human to fear something that is different from us. But the very meaning of evolution is to cross over that fear or cross over that hatred, which some people may, out of their ignorance, feel. They need to cross over it. They need to feel empathy, and that is the only way they can be evolved. As long as people persist in race bias or bias based on somebody's background, their color, or where they come from, as long as they do that, we cannot call them evolved. Sadly, they are still in their primal or animal stage. Then, so it is a very funny poem. And Wole Soyinka is somebody who has campaigned quite fiercely against the colonial rule in Nigeria. He has very vehemently protested and fought. And after that, too, to the successive Nigerian rulers, he has been a very strong voice, a very strong critic. For he says that he firmly believes that he will oppose the boot that stamps on humanity, no matter what color the foot that wears it is. That is what he says about, his idea of protest. So he says that, in this interview, Emils asks him a question. Were Africans of that period rather aggressive? The ones who came to London, did they get an aggressive name? And here is where Soyinka tells that, yes, racism forced many of them to become aggressive. So in this poem, we see that even in the face of such an insulting question, he holds on to his dignity, his manners, the beauty of his speech. The poem is written in such a very beautiful language. Nowhere is he reduced to calling names. Nothing is making him lose his character or his demeanor. He comes out of it shining. He comes out of it the hero. Thank you. For those of us students who haven't seen Wole Soyinka, I have a young artist here. We'll show you the picture. I think this is exactly how Wole Soyinka looks. This is an excellent picture. Do you know what he's famous for?
Yes.
What?
He's famous for a poem he wrote.
A poem and also story. So many stories he's written. He won the Nobel Prize.
Nobel Prize.
Thank you.